There are certain things in life that we all share, that we will all do. We all have to sleep, we all have to eat, we all have to use the restroom, all of these things. We don't often celebrate those things. We celebrate the things that some of us will do. Not all of us will celebrate graduation from high school, but we celebrate that. Not all of us will get to retire, but we celebrate that. There is something else that we all share that will happen for all of us. And we don't really celebrate that either. We're all going to die. Someday, death will knock on our door and we will be no more. That happens to all of us, every single one. We have to ask along the way how we're going to deal with this indirectly, because death will visit us in indirect ways. Death will take people from us along our journey. And we have to build a relationship with death before we know it firsthand. And today's poem is going to prompt a discussion about that. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where literature lives. Today's poem is from the greatest poet of all time, Emily Dickinson. I'm going to make myself real small in the corner because we have some other stuff to talk about. The poem will exist in 3 different playlists here on the channel. It will exist in the Poetry Discussion playlist, now over 840 video strong, cruising towards 850, on our way to 1,000, should we be so lucky to get there. It will also exist in the Emily Dickinson playlist, a playlist dedicated to the greatest poet of all time, and it will exist in the horror playlist here on the channel as well. The poem in question, "One Need Not Be a Chamber to be Haunted," and it reads as such. One need not be a chamber to be haunted. One need not be a house. The brain has corridors surpassing material place, far safer of a midnight meeting, external ghost, than an interior confronting that cooler host. Far safer through an abbey gallop, the stones a chase, than moonless one's a self-encounter in lonesome place. Ourself, behind ourself concealed, should startle most. Assassin hid in our apartment, be horror's least. The prudent carries a revolver. He bolts the door, overlooking a superior specter more near. Now, I want to ask a question that is perhaps not obvious. Why, though she is, in my estimation, the greatest poet of all time, is Emily Dickinson not quite nearly so celebrated as others? Now, I've pulled up Google Trends. This tells you the search interest on Google of different people, subjects, ideas. Very fun, very easy to get lost in the rabbit hole of Google Trends. But what I've done here is I've pulled up the entire search history of Emily Dickinson versus Edgar Allan Poe, another poet that deals extensively with the ideas of death. You can see here that in the early days of the internet, in the early days of Google tracking, at least so far as Google is concerned, Emily Dickinson outstripped Edgar Allan Poe. Let me see if I can. I apologize for I was not expecting to do this, so it might take me a moment. Here we go. Over here, the blue line represents Emily Dickinson. The red line is Edgar Allan Poe. So you see here, these spikes in Emily Dickinson outstripping Edgar Allan Poe's plateaus. As we have gone on, Edgar Allan Poe is massively beating Emily Dickinson. Now, this is not search results precisely. These are the relative interests in these things. So we don't get the number of searches here. We just get the interest. And here, more recently, Edgar Allan Poe is way above Emily Dickinson's plateau. Now, why is that? I think that it has something to do with the idea of the macabre, which I think is more prevalent in society under a different term, slightly different term, known as danse macabre. Now, what is danse macabre? I have pulled this up from Grokpedia. The danse macabre, or dance with death, is a late medieval European allegorical motif in visual arts and literature portraying death often as animated skeletons, compelling individuals from every social stratum, including popes, emperors, and peasants, to join in a procession or dance, thereby illustrating death's indiscriminate conquest over all humanity, regardless of rank or virtue. You've seen these pictures. They come largely from medieval art, but the idea really does go back way farther than that. This dance with death is not a very it's not a very serious one. It is not a critical or in-depth analysis of the idea of death. As noted here, it is often in the visual arts that we get this, but I think that Edgar Allan Poe is more closely associated with danse macabre than macabre, if we're talking about the strict sort of definitions. This imagery emerged amid recurrent plagues, particularly the Black Death of the mid-14th century, which decimated populations and fostered widespread preoccupation with mortality's harsh egalitarianism. The motif's earliest documented regardless of who you were, regardless of how protected you considered yourself, regardless of how much privilege you had, the Black Death did not care. It would come for you. Pardon me. The motif's earliest documented visual incarnation appears in a 1424 to 1425 fresco series at Paris's Cimetière des Innocents, depicting death. So I don't speak Italian, you might notice. Depicting death summoning figures in hierarchical order to underscore life's transience. Subsequent manifestations proliferated across Europe in church murals, such as Bernd Notke's 1463 triptych in Tallinn, and wall paintings in Lubeck, serving as a memento mori exhortations to the faithful while critiquing societal pretensions in the face of inevitable demise. Literary precedents traced to the 14th century poems evolving into didactic verse, accompanying illustrations, with the genre peaking in the 15th century, before influencing later woodcut series like Hans Holbein's 1538 prints, which adapted the theme for printed dissemination. In Danse Macabre's enduring hallmark lies its stark, casual realism. Plagues and wars rendered hierarchical illusions futile, compelling artists to convey through grotesque vitality that death's summons admits no exemptions, a theme resonant in an era of empirical devastation rather than abstract theology. Now, if you wanted something that was perhaps a little bit more easily digestible, the Danse Macabre allows something more kitsch, something more almost campy into the fold for death. Now, I think that being too close to something and being too far from something offers a less serious approach. Edgar Allan Poe feels less serious than, say, Emily Dickinson. And so if you're too, you can take this with all things in life that are inevitable. If you have too little food, that is not healthy. If you have too much food, that is not healthy. If you have too little sleep, that is not healthy. If you have too much sleep, that is not healthy. But the depictions of this are not often as stark as they are for death. If you want something closer to what happens with death when we're too far from it or too close to it, I think you have to go to something more perhaps carnal in desire. The sex drive. You have too much sex, you're not healthy with it. You have too little sex, you're not healthy with it. It forces strange ideations about the subject. I think, perhaps, we are too far removed, it is too abstract to us, the idea of death. So, this maybe forces a different type of ideation around the subject. We think of it differently. We think of death in different terms. That has led to the sort of extreme violence that pops up in society from time to time in odd and approximate sort of discussions. Approximate in that it is not the practice of death. It is not the consequence of death that weighs on us most heavily, that we are stuck with most often. It is not dealing with death, or it is dealing with senseless violence. That, I think, propagates itself through the internalization of something like Edgar Allan Poe, which deals with the sort of weird death that with which we are most familiar in today's society. We are too far from death. People live way older and die in strange formats, hospitals and old folks' homes and beds. That was not the case for most of history. That is not the case in quote-unquote nature. How many deer die hooked up to a ventilator, for example? This was the case for us through most of human evolution, through most of human existence. Today we are removed from the process and procession of death. So we have to deal with it, and it's not going away. It's going to be with us. We're going to know people that die before we inevitably succumb to death itself, ourselves. And in the 14th, 15th century, when this idea of danse macabre was first sort of instantiated in visual depictions, it was first painted, it was first carved into wood. It was too close. We dealt with death all the time, at random seemingly. The Black Plague took some incredible percentage of people. I think the estimates are between 30 and 50% of people in in Europe, at least at that time, died from the Black Plague. And that's extreme. Think of every other person you know. 50%, every other person you know. I know him, I know her, she's gone. I know her, I know him, he's gone. It's a very extreme relationship with death. Emily Dickinson allows us a more fine-grained sort of, a more fine-grained understanding of death than Edgar Allan Poe. Poe often sort of obfuscates the starkness of death, whereas Emily Dickinson, even in the poems where people sort of unwittingly die, because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. It was centuries before I realized that we were headed towards eternity, right? Even in those poems, the proximity to death is there. They're in the same carriage, but it is not immediately recognized by the speaker that she is dead. Edgar Allan Poe, pardon me, I'm a little off today. obfuscates that in a different way. You see people sinking into madness, right? So they are in this sort of ethereal state before death or around death or while they kill. They are not recognizing the brevity of life. Emily Dickinson does her best to put that into us, to make that conscious for us. This poem, One Need Not Be a Chamber to be Haunted, is about the relationship with death in a different way. One need not be a chamber to be haunted. Those ghosts will be with us whether or not we are steadfast like a house. They will follow us. They will not be in a house. These ghosts, the lingering remnants of death. And because I think Emily Dickinson allows us this understanding of death rather than a recognition of death, in a world where, I hate to sound like the movie trailer guy, in a world where death is something which is less prevalent, but more perhaps talked about, we have a perverse relationship with it. And I think that is the difference in the popularity of these two writers. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I do on this channel, and I hope to have you back for the next one.